Brought to you by Helene Curtis, makers of Stop F deodorants, flowing cream, spray, and stick, Suave hairdressing, and End and Dandruff Treatment shampoo. Now let's all play What's My Line?
And now let's meet our award-winning What's My Line panel. First, the delightful star of stage and television, Miss Arlene Francis.
Thank you. And now, an excellent comedian that you have all enjoyed on the Steve Allen Show, and soon you can enjoy him in a Broadway show called Drink to Me Only, and we will, too, Mr. Tom Poston.
Speaking of Drink to Me Only, I would like to propose a toast at this time to a charming lady of Broadway, Miss Dorothy Kilgallen.
And I would like to introduce one of the judges of the forthcoming Atlantic City Beauty Pageant, probably the most qualified of all the judges. He'll be seen on CBS Saturday night doing his judging, Bennett, Cerf.
After all these years on the panel with Dorothy and Arlene, I feel I ought to know beauty when I see one. And I'll have my wife there to make sure that I do too. And here's another great authority on beautiful women, Mr. John Charles Daly.
Bennett is too kind. But what a consummation, and how devoutly to be wished that I should be an authority on beautiful women. I'm an authority, however, on sticking panels, which is the mission we've set for ourselves tonight. We have some very interesting occupations and nice people attached to them. We'll also have a famous mystery guest before my friends on the panel a bit later in the show, and we'll meet our first challenger in just... And now let's meet our first challenger. Will you come in and sign in, please? William L. Hughes, right? Mr. Hughes, where are you from?
Well, originally from Pittenweem.
I beg your pardon.
From Pittenweem,
Kansas?
Scotland.
Scotland. Well, there you are. I started off...
Now living in London.
Now living in London. Well, it's nice to have a guest from so far away come to visit us, sir.
Thank
Would you meet the panel, Mr. Hughes?
Evening.
And then will you join me over here, Mr. Hughes, please? Have you, by any chance, had a chance to learn how we keep score on this program?
Yes, I
All
think
right, if
I
you know how we keep score, there's nothing left to be done but to let the audience here in the theater and the folks who are looking in at home know exactly what your line is. All right. Panel, we will tell you that Mr. Hughes is salaried, and let's begin the general questioning with Arlene Francis.
Mr. Hughes, do you work for a non-profit-making organization?
I do.
Are you in a position of authority in your job?
Yes.
Do you work for a city government?
No.
1 down and 9 to go, Mr. Poston.
Do you work for a government body of any kind?
Yes, I think the answer is yes to that.
And you are an authority in this work. Do you deal directly with people?
Yes.
Do they come to see you?
No.
2 down and 8 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Mr. Hughes, have you ever been in Scotland Yard?
I have been.
But not arrested?
No. How long was your term?
Were you there as anything other than a visitor?
Yes.
Did your work take you there?
Yes.
Do you have something to do with the police?
Yes.
Do I have to guess Your rank or something like that? Are you an inspector?
No.
That's
Take
3
it,
down
sir.
and 7 to go, Mr. Cerf. Actually, to be fair with you, we are now trying to determine rank, because I think you've gotten...
Mr. Hughes, would you say that you were above the rank of an inspector?
Yes.
Well, are you the chief of the whole London or English security and
No.
detective?
No, that's
Not that
4
high, huh?
4 down and 6 to go, Miss Francis.
Do you have anything to do with prison life?
No.
That's 5 down and 5 to go, Mr. Poston.
Does your work, is your work in Scotland Yard itself?
Yes.
And you are above the rank of inspector. I am sorry, I don't know the ranks. Are you...
Well, actually, this is a bit unfair, because you have got it. Mr. Hughes is the detective superintendent of Scotland Yard. Actually, a very fascinating story, much of which Mr. Hughes has told us he can't talk about, but he's been with the Yard, as they call it, I believe, sir,
Right.
33 years. But more important, I think, in terms of interest, he was with Sir Winston Churchill during the war when he was Prime Minister, and you were at Yalta, and actually you traveled wherever the Prime Minister traveled in those days.
Yes.
So he has had a career in Scotland Yard, which is perhaps as interesting as any that has ever been known. Dorothy?
I was wondering if Mr. Hughes' office was in the new part or the old part of Scotland Yard.
I work in the new now.
The new? Oh.
I used
Only
to work
200
in the
years
old.
old.
May
I ask you a question?
He knows too much
I
about Scotland
I just
Yard.
wanted to say that as a mystery story fan, I think I'd rather have your job than any on earth.
I'm sorry, I...
Dorothy said as a mystery story fan, she thinks she'd rather have your job than any on earth.
Oh, yes.
Mr.
Bennett?
Hughes, could I ask you one
It is
question?
interesting.
If you could give a quick answer. Why is it called Scotland Yard?
Well, the original headquarters of the Metropolitan Police, which is what Scotland Yard is, were in an old yard where the coaches from which the coaches used to start from London for Scotland. That was at the Trafalgar Square end of Whitehall, and the original building was there. Then, when they needed more room, they moved further down Whitehall onto the embankment, between the embankment and Whitehall, and Scotland Yard building is now called New Scotland Yard. In fact, it is only a change of quarters, and the old Scotland Yard was in that yard from which the coaches used to start. The horse coaches, that is.
Thank you very much.
There we are. Well, thank you very much, Superintendent. I think that's the proper title. Nice to have had you with us in West Nile. Will you say goodnight to the gallery, please? Well, I must congratulate you, panel, but let's see what you can do with the second challenger. Would you come in and sign in, please? Thank you. Sign in right there, please. Mrs. John Sonic
Seth.
Sen. Mrs. John Sonic. Mrs. Sonicson, where are you from?
Copenhagen.
Copenhagen. Oh, we do have folks from very far away coming to see us tonight. Mrs. Sonicson, the panel. Mrs. Ham, would you join me over here, please? Now, do you by any chance know how we keep score?
Yes, I do.
All right, then we'll let the folks at home and our friends in the audience in the theater know exactly what your line is. All right, panel. Mrs. Sonicson is self-employed, and let's begin the general questioning with Bennett Cerf.
Mrs. Sonicson, is the fact that you are Danish and come from Copenhagen have anything whatever to do with the occupation in which you are engaged?
No.
1 down and 9 to go, Miss Francis.
Do you have to have special training for your job? Not necessarily a formal education, but special training?
Yes.
Is there anything artistic about your work?
Yes.
Now, I would think here, if you would allow me, Mrs. Sonicson, to correct you, that we have very broad terms of reference on the program, and if we were allowed this this affirmative answer to stand, we wouldn't be able to flip a card. And that's enough reason to flip it and make it no. Put out 8 to go, Mr. Poston. Not artistic in our terms of reference.
May I ask whether you deal with people in your work?
Yes.
Do you deal with people directly in your work?
Yes.
Do you touch them?
No.
That makes it 3 down and 7 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Do people watch you doing what you do? Yes. Are they amused or entertained by what you do? Yes. Do they pay admission to see you do it? Sometimes. Are you in any way athletic? Yes. Do you participate in some sport which is also played in this country? Yes. Is it something that you play opposite an opponent or opponents rather than just by yourself? For instance, tennis as opposed to golf. By myself. Oh, you do? Well, then I gotta know.
Well, now, wait a minute. May we have a small conference? I think, actually, Dorothy, to be fair, there would be instances where we might basically say that Mrs. Hunnickson was by herself, but fundamentally there is an element of opposition when she is doing what she does.
There are other people who are trying to do the same thing better, would you put it that way?
That is a splendid way to put it, yes.
Then, Mrs. Sonicson, have you anything to do with track? No.
No, track. 4 down and 6 to go, Mr. Cerf.
Is it correct then, Mr. Sunningson, to say that you would never appear in a meet, a track meet, or a meet where people are throwing discuses and javelins? You would never appear at such a contest.
That's correct. I will never.
Do you do any of your exploits in or near the water?
Say that question again.
Would you say... Do you do any of your exploits? Do you perform any of your feats in the water?
Yes.
Is it some kind of swimming that you are noted for?
This is correct, yes.
Well, are you a champion swimmer at some length?
Yes.
Long distance swimmer. Long distance swimmer. Is there something more we should
Actually,
get?
you're absolutely right, Bennett, so we'll flip all the cards. Actually...
Well, there seems some question. Was there more to be determined?
Well, only because your term of reference, when you said a swimmer at some length, the specific title would be a professional distance swimmer, because Mrs. Sonicson is Greta Anderson, who, as you will remember, in this past week, swam the English Channel against...
Yes, it was the Channel, yeah.
37?
30.
30 competitors, most of them men, beat the lot of them, set a new woman's record of 11?
11 hours flat.
11 hours flat.
Which do you prefer, the English Channel or Channel 2?
And, you know, a nice thing, we very often lose sight of it, but actually you started out, or let us say you first came to the championship status as an Olympic swimmer, didn't you?
That's correct. I won the Olympic Games in '48. I was then swimming from Copenhagen, Denmark. And later on, I'm now a United States citizen, and I swam this first year for the United States.
Yeah, that's right. It was done for us this year. And it's very nice because it saves Mrs. Sonicson the fare from Dover over to Calais, you see. It's a good way. These are, you know, inflationary times. You need a bit of this, don't you?
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You've
you.
been a wonderful guest. It's nice to have you. And now we'll meet tonight's mystery guest in just a moment. But first, here is a word from our alternate sponsor. Now we come to the special feature of our program, the appearance of our mystery celebrity, for which I ask my friends on the panel to blindfold themselves. Blindfolds all in place, panel?
Yes, John.
Good. Will you come in, mystery challenger, and sign in, please? All right, Panel, as you know, in the case of our mystery challenger, we go to a different form of questioning. You will ask questions one at a time, in turn, moving clockwise, and we'll begin it all with Dorothy Kilgallen.
Well, those sounded like awfully feminine screams in the audience, which may be terribly misleading, but, I guess it... Well, I mean, it sounded as if there was some great-looking guy out there. I don't like it. Now I'm really confused. Have I spoken to you on the long-distance telephone within the last week? No. No.
1 down and 9 to go, Mr. Cerf.
Are you a motion picture star?
Well, no, not exactly.
2 down and 8 to go, Miss Francis.
Do you appear in television?
Sometimes good.
Mr. Poston.
Are you going to return to television this fall after a short and unfortunate hiatus? If it's who I think you...
What exactly do you mean by that?
If it's who I think you are, I'd better put that in plainer words. I'm just kidding. Are you going to work have a show starting this fall on television?
Are you speaking specifically...
Not
Mr.
you,
Poston?
John. I'm asking the mystery girl.
Well, I mean, the answer would be no if it was me, but if it was I'm awfully sorry about that. But do you mean a weekly series, or are you speaking of appearances in the fall, or how do you want to frame this?
One of the biggest
I'd like to
and
frame
greatest
you.
shows, and it's all his own, and it's going to be on every week.
What? A show? Oh, yes. I think we can answer that no. Thank you very much, Mr. Poston. That make it 3 down and 7 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Is that the Ed Sullivan show? You may... have you ever made any records? I mean, discs. Not track records.
Yes.
Mr. Cerf?
Do you sometimes weigh more than 250 pounds?
4 down and 6 to go, Miss Francis.
You think of Gleason? We don't really know if this is a man or a woman. Are you,
I gave up on a man long ago.
Are you a comedian?
Before tonight.
How did you end that word?
Are you a comedian?
Sometimes.
Mr. Poston?
Did you just finish an engagement in Atlantic City?
Swimming?
Mrs. Sonicson, are you back again? Did you just...
No.
Oh.
That makes it 5 down and 5 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
In your professional life, do you use one name rather than two?
Not if I can help it.
I'd like to establish something that I'm not even sure of yet. Are you male?
Never.
6 down and 4 to go, Miss Francis.
And I resent that.
Do you do something other than act?
Sometimes.
Mr. Poston?
Are you best known as a comedian, a comedy actress?
Not exactly.
7 down and 3 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Are you better known for your singing?
Well,
Yes.
to tell the truth, yes.
Yes,
Well, let's
Mr. Cerf.
tell the truth.
Oh.
All right, go ahead and guess it, Dorothy.
She just gave it away.
All right. I pass. It isn't my turn anyway.
Yeah.
It's your
Mr.
turn.
Cerf.
I'm not enlightened. Do you ever do a panel show besides singing?
I do that also sometimes, yes.
I would guess Polly Bergen, but I'm sure not.
Does indeed a colleague in a very true sense of all of yours.
I thought I could sneak that to tell the truth.
You did. That was just that's what I thought.
Without even thinking. But the record album I thought was going to give it because Miss Polly does make Columbia Records, and I figured you were headed.
Album, isn't it?
Yeah, new
yes,
record
I have
album.
one.
First time I ever thought a pretty girl was Jackie Gleason.
You've done it. Miss Polly, thanks very much. It's been wonderful
thank
having
you
you
so
as a
much.
guest.
I loved it.
Good to see you and watch my line. We'll have another contestant after this word from our sponsor. Now let's have a final challenger. Will you come in and sign in, please? Right there. Kay Sinclair. Is it Miss or Mrs. Sinclair? Mrs. Sinclair. Where are you from?
Hollywood, California.
Hollywood, California. Wonderful. Mrs. Sinclair, the panel. Panel. Mrs. Sinclair, would you join me over here, please? You know how we keep score, Mrs. Sinclair?
Yes, I do.
Fine, then let's let the folks in the audience and those who are at home know exactly what your line is. All right, panel. You have something less than 3 minutes. We will tell you that Mrs. Sinclair is self-employed, and let's begin the general questioning with Tony Poston. Tom Poston, sorry.
Self-employed. Do you deal in services, Mrs. Sinclair?
Yes, I do.
Do you talk to people directly
Yes.
in your business? Do they come to visit you?
Yes.
Do you ever touch them?
No.
1 down and 9 to go. Miss Kilgallen.
Is there anything like a product connected with what you do?
No.
2 down and 8 to go. Mr. Cerf.
Mrs. Sinclair, is your work related in any shape or fashion to either the motion picture or television industry?
No, it's not.
3 down and 7 to go. Miss Francis.
Do you work out of doors, Mrs. Sinclair?
No, I don't.
4 down and 6 to go. Mr. Poston.
Do you need a special kind of education for your work?
Yes.
And do you, may I ask, do you wear a special kind of costume or uniform?
No.
To do it?
That makes it 5 down and 5 to go. Miss Kilgallen.
You need a special degree? Is that what you mean by special education? For what you do?
Yes.
Would you need a college education to do
Yes.
what you do?
Yeah, I would not. It's difficult to be too precise. Let us say that there is a very substantial degree of formal education and some specialized educational training perhaps necessary.
Do the people who come to you learn anything which benefits them?
Oh, I hope so.
Do you talk to them in groups rather than individually?
No, I don't.
That makes it 6 down and 4 to go, Mr. Cerf.
Mrs. Sinclair, would you say that your work was more mental than physical, the work that you
Yes.
do with these people? As a result of your talking with them, are they enabled to secure jobs that they might not have secured before they had your services?
Not generally, no.
No, I don't think so. 7 down and 3 to go, Miss Francis.
Is there anything psychological about your work or psychiatric?
Yes.
Are you ever referred to as Dr. Sinclair?
No.
And her magic bullet? No.
No.
8 down and 2 to go, Mr. Poston.
May I assume that you are not a doctor,
You may assume that.
but your work is psychological?
Yes.
When you teach them, are they made happier by this knowledge? I mean, by
I
by
hope so.
Very good question, and we've just run out of time, so we'll flip the remainder of the card.
counselor is-
Marriage counselor is right. You're just short. Yes. Thank you very much. Nice to have you. Yes, and say goodbye to the family, would you? Thank you.
How are the marriages out there, Miss Sinclair?
And on that happy note, By golly, just under the wire, but I'd flipped the last card, Arlene.
I know you did, and I don't hold it against you, Joe.
And having flipped, I will just say this is John Daly. Good night, Arlene.
You can flip for me anytime, Mr.
Yes,
Daly, and I'll do
indeed.
the same for you. Good night, Tom Poston, and good luck with your new play.
Thank you. The same to you, Miss
Thank you.
Francis. Good night.
Good night, Tom. Nice to see you. Good night, Bennett.
I don't think I'm betraying any secrets when I tell you this is John Daly's second flip within 24 hours. Good night, John.
That will be enough of that, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on What's My Line.
If you'd like to attend our broadcast and see the panel and our guests in person, write for tickets to What's My Line, CBS Television, 485 Madison Avenue, New York, 22, New York. Transportation for contestants on What's My Line is arranged by United Airlines. This has been a CBS Television Network production in association with Mark Ritson and Bill Cotton.